I turned 77 last month. My son hadn't called, but my grandniece Lavinia had sent me flowers and a handwritten card. Like always, I opened the window that morning and let the breeze in from the lake. The scent of pine and cold water drifted through the screen on the wall beside me. Was a photo Alan and me standing in front of the cabin. His arm was around my shoulder and his eyes were laughing. We had no idea back then what that house would come to mean to me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand your ground when someone tried to take what mattered most to you. I'm Judith Howard, born and raised in Kinburn, Wisconsin, a town small enough that no one locks their doors and you can walk from the diner to the post office in under 5 minutes. I worked nearly 4 decades at the Northland paper mill, doing the books I liked, numbers. There was comfort in their order. My husband, Alan, worked shift supervisor until he retired early. He always wanted a place by the lake. We bought the cabin a year before he died. Spent nearly everything we had on it, he said. It's time, Judith. Time we finally enjoy something that's just ours. It wasn't much from the outside. A 2-story wooden frame, a deep wraparound porch, and a stone fireplace he built with his own hands, but it was quiet, and it was ours. He only got 1 summer there. His heart gave out while he was sleeping. It took me years to go back. At first, I couldn't bear the thought. His boots still sat by the door. His fishing rods leaned in the corner. But after the grief softened, it became the only place that felt like home. My son Brent never understood the cabin. He's always been distant, even as a boy. Quiet, sharp-eyed, formal with his affection. He moved to Milwaukee after college and calls once a month out of obligation 10 years ago. He married Trinity, a sleek woman from Chicago who once brought her own smoothie to my kitchen and turned down my apple pie. They had twins a few years back, Audrey and Hudson. I barely know them. They visit maybe twice a year, never for long when they do. Trinity hovers, like I might drop one of them just by looking too long. The only one who truly comes around is Lavinia. She's my sister, Pearl's granddaughter, red curls, bakery boxes in hand, and a voice that fills the room. She visits almost every weekend and never needs a reason. Sometimes we plant hostas by the path or sit on the porch and watch the water turn pink at dusk. She makes the house feel alive again last Friday. Brent called his name lit up the screen while I was making tea. He said they were coming over Saturday afternoon. Said we had something to discuss in person. That's all. He never visits without a reason. I told Lavinia right away. She offered to come early. I told her that would help. When Saturday came, I took out my navy dress with the little blue flowers Alan used to say. It matched my eyes. I hadn't worn it in years, but it still fit a little looser than before. By 11, Lavinia's Ford pulled up out front. I watched her from the window. Arms full of croissants and wild flowers. She was smiling. I wasn't. And then the silver Lexus came into view. Brent stepped out first. Impeccable suit, no wrinkle in sight. Trinity followed in white slacks and dark sunglasses. They didn't bring the kids. My hands tightened on the doorknob as I opened the door. I wasn't sure what was coming, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Brent stepped through the doorway like he owned the place. His voice was polite, but it carried that familiar stiffness he never seemed to lose. "You look well, Mom," he said, brushing my cheek with a quick kiss. Trinity followed right behind him, still wearing her sunglasses indoors. She didn't smile, just gave a quiet hello and glanced around as if inspecting the furniture. They noticed Lavinia right away. She stepped out from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. "Oh, you're here," Brent said, eyebrows tightening. "Didn't realize we had company." "I'm not company," she replied, smiling. "I'm family." We all sat in the living room. Brent and Trinity took the couch. Lavinia and I sat across from them. The air was still. Brent leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We've been thinking," he started, "about the cabin." I didn't say anything at first. I just folded my hands in my lap and waited. "You're 77, Brent continued. "That's not old, but living alone in a remote area by the lake, it's not ideal. There are risks, safety issues. If something were to happen..." "I have neighbors," I said. "Gina and Cliff check in on me daily. There's a panic button by the door. And I manage just fine." Trinity shifted in her seat. "It's also about the financial burden," she added. "Taxes, repairs, 2 homes. That's a lot to maintain." "I have savings," I said. "Plenty to handle all that." Brent nodded as if expecting that answer. "Still, we think the best option is for the cabin to come to us. It's time." My fingers tensed slightly in my lap. "Come to you?" "For the children," he said. "Audrey and Hudson need a place to grow up with nature. You've had your time with it. Now it's their turn." Lavinia sat forward. "That's her home, Brent. You can't just take it. It's family property," he replied, calm but firm. "That means decisions should benefit the whole family." "She spends most of the year there," Lavinia said. "It's where she feels close to Alan. It's not just a house." Trinity gestured lightly toward my living room. "She has this place. It's enough for one person." I kept my voice even. "That cabin is the only place that feels like mine. Alan and I bought it with our savings. We built a life there. I'm not giving it up." Brent's mouth pressed into a thin line. I recognized that look. He used to wear it when he didn't get his way as a child. "I didn't want to go here," he said. "But your health is declining. Your eyesight's worse. Blood pressure's been up. The hospital is 40 minutes away. I've had the same mild issues for years," I said. "Nothing serious, and I've never needed more than a routine checkup." He leaned back. "We've looked into a place in Green Bay. A nice assisted living facility. You'd have company meals and medical staff right there." Lavinia shot to her feet. "What are you even talking about?" "She's active. She walks, gardens, shops. She doesn't need a nursing home." Trinity looked directly at me. "Last year you fell and broke your wrist. That could have been your hip. Or your head." "I slipped on wet leaves," I said. "It could happen to anyone." I called the ambulance myself. "We're just trying to help," Brent said. "To make things easier for everyone." "I don't need help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need space. That cabin is my space." The room went quiet. Then Brent spoke again, a little sharper. "We've already spoken to a lawyer. We could do a deed of gift, or pursue other legal options." Lavinia turned to him. "Are you threatening your own mother?" Brent shook his head. "It's not a threat, just a fact." I closed my eyes for a moment. Images came to me. Alan planting flowers along the path, the lake in the morning light, the sound of wind through the trees. Judith, Lavinia asked, "Are you all right?" I nodded and looked up at Brent. "Your father and I built that place together. We poured everything into it. And I still live there. So no, I'm not handing over the keys." Brent leaned forward again. "Think about it. This isn't just about you. It's about the kids. They need room to grow. They need their own memories." "They're welcome to visit," I said. "I'd love that. But they're not moving in, and neither are you." Trinity crossed her arms. "Children need freedom, not supervision." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "It's not for sale, it's not for rent, and it's not up for discussion." Brent looked at me, then at Trinity. Something shifted in his face. "Okay," he said calmly. "We understand your feelings, but think it over. We'll talk again." He stood. Trinity followed. They declined lunch and left the house with short hugs and tight smiles. I stood by the window watching their car disappear around the corner. Back inside, Lavinia paced across the living room. That was unbelievable. Telling you you're too old, that you don't need the place, I wasn't expecting it either, I said, sitting down slowly. You're not going to give it to them, are you? No, I said. I'm not. She sat beside me and took my hand. They can't take it from you. It's yours. I know, I said, but something about Brent's tone at the end, that wasn't like him. He gave up too easily. Lavinia was quiet. Then she nodded. Maybe they're changing tactics. Maybe, I said, but we'll be ready either way. She stood and walked to the kitchen. I'll make tea, and we'll figure out what comes next. I stayed where I was, watching the photograph of Alan on the mantel. He was smiling in that picture, always smiling in the photos. I wondered what he would have said if he'd been here today. The phone rang again. It had only been 15 minutes since Brent left. Lavinia picked it up, listened, then handed it to me. It's him. I held the receiver to my ear. Yes, Brent. His voice was brisk. We've made a decision. We're coming next Saturday to collect the cabin keys and move your things. You can keep whatever's left, but you won't be staying there anymore. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, All right, Brent, whatever you say. He paused. Really? See you next Saturday. I hung up. Lavinia stared at me wide-eyed. You agreed? No, I said quietly. I bought us some time. She leaned in. What are you thinking? Call the man with the lot in Maple Grove, I said. The one you mentioned last month? Let's go see it. Monday. On Monday morning, we drove north along the lakeshore with the windows cracked just enough to let in the breeze. The road dipped and curved between tall evergreens, the lake visible in glimpses through the trees. Lavinia turned off onto a gravel road, tires crunching underfoot as we pulled into a clearing. A small wooden sign read, For Sale. Beyond it lay a wide slope of land open at the top and then descending gently toward the water. Pines stood to the west, and the lake opened wide on the east, calm and glassy in the early light. This is it, she said, putting the car in park. It's been sitting unsold for months. I opened the door and stepped out, leaning slightly on my cane. The ground was soft, the air clean. I turned slowly, taking in the space. The land felt open, but private. There was quiet here, the kind of quiet that settled in your chest. You think there's enough room? I asked. Almost 2.5 acres, she said. Plenty of space for a house and then some. A red pickup truck appeared at the bend. The driver waved through the windshield as she pulled in behind us. She was stout in her 60s, with short gray hair and a windbreaker zipped to the neck. You must be Judith, she said, extending her hand. Norma Pettigrew. You're looking at my listing. We walked the property together. Norma pointed out the boundary lines and talked about the soil, the road access, the power lines that had been added a few years ago. I asked her if it was possible to bring a full-size structure in on a flatbed. Norma blinked. You mean a finished house? Yes, I said. One that already exists. She looked over the slope, thoughtful. If you pour the foundation in time and the road holds steady, it could be done. That's a serious move, though. I've made up my mind, I told her. What's your asking price? She gave a number. I didn't haggle. We signed papers that same day in her Maple Grove office. I held the pen firmly, my hand only shaking slightly as I wrote my name. That night, I called Ed Pritchard, a retired contractor who used to fix things around the lake house. He was always kind, always on time. I told him I had a project. He chuckled and asked if my roof was leaking again. No, I said. I need a house moved, quietly, by Saturday. He whistled on the other end of the line. Well, I've got a cousin who used Johnson & Sons. They moved her whole farmhouse last year. I'll get their number for you. I thanked him, then added, I might need some creative help, too. Judith, he said, what are you up to? The next day, I spoke with Ray Johnson, the owner of the house moving company. He had a quick voice and a long list of questions: age of structure, wood, condition, wall thickness, plumbing, chimney. "We'll need to reinforce it," he said. "We can do it fast, but it'll cost more." "I don't care about the cost," I said. "Just get it done by Friday." "We'll start prepping Wednesday morning," he replied. "Have anything fragile removed before then?" That night, I called Lavinia. "They're starting Wednesday?" I told her. She was quiet a moment. "You're really doing it." "I am. And there's something else, that other idea." She laughed. "The decoy. I want it to match the legal description, but just barely." She said Ed knew some carpenters who could help. She'd call him first thing. By Tuesday afternoon, we were packing. Boxes filled the front room: books, dishes, quilts, framed pictures. Alan's wooden duck collection. The rhythm of sorting and lifting filled the house with motion. Lavinia packed faster than I did, but she paused often to show me something: an old birthday card, a snow globe, a photo from our last Christmas there. Every drawer seemed to hold something I'd forgotten. It didn't feel like leaving. It felt like honoring the life we'd had. That evening, 2 men from Johnson & Sons arrived in coveralls. One had Mike stitched on his chest. They walked the perimeter, knocking gently on walls, peeking under the porch, taking photos of the supports. They nodded approvingly. Sturdy Mike said, "We'll need to lift it by Thursday morning. Foundation at the new site ready. Pouring starts tomorrow," Lavinia said. "I've already arranged it." They left at dusk. By then, the last of our boxes were sealed and stacked. The house felt empty, but still ours. Wednesday came early. A crew of workers arrived at first light. They moved like they'd done this 100 times, disconnecting utilities, bracing walls, digging narrow trenches along the foundation. Steel beams were slid beneath the floor joists, then secured with crossbars. I stood outside with my thermos of tea, watching from one of Alan's wicker chairs. Lavinia sat beside me. "Impressive, isn't it?" "He would have loved this," I said. By mid-morning, another truck arrived, this one with Ed and 3 younger men. They unloaded lumber and set up near the far side of the property. Judith, Ed said, tipping his cap. "Meet Tim, Jesse, and Randy. Good with tools, bad with haircuts." The boys grinned. Tim unrolled a set of sketches on the table. "We'll start as soon as your real house rolls out. This'll be up by Friday night. From the outside, it'll look like what the paperwork says: 2 stories, 4 rooms, front porch. But inside, no insulation, no power. Floors won't hold weight. Roof won't shed water. It'll fall apart the first hard rain." I nodded. "Just make sure it still fits the deed." Thursday morning, the lift began. A long bed trailer rolled in, and the hydraulic jacks started their slow, steady rise. The house lifted inch by inch, creaking softly. Once it cleared the old foundation, the trailer slid beneath. Workers moved in tight circles, adjusting supports and checking bolts. At the same time, Ed's team was hammering and sawing. By noon, the first walls of the decoy were going up, angled slightly off square boards, mismatched and unsealed. By nightfall, the real house was ready to move. It rolled out under escort, crawling up the gravel road toward Maple Grove. Friday, just before dark, we stood on the slope of our new lot. The house had made it. Johnson's crew lowered it onto the fresh foundation, secured it, and stepped back. It stood there quietly, as if it had always belonged. The next morning, we returned to the old lot. Ed's decoy was finished: walls, warped porch, loose no glass in the windows. The stairs groaned with every step. "Want to see inside?" Tim asked. We climbed up carefully. The floors were bare planks with gaps. The rooms were empty except for shadows. One stair led up to a second floor that sloped so badly you could see daylight through the seams. "It matches the deed," Ed said. "Technically." We heard a car door close. Brent's Lexus was in the driveway. Brent stepped out of the car, first sunglasses tucked into the collar of his shirt. Trinity followed close behind, clipboard in hand. The twins, Audrey and Hudson, looked sleepy from the drive and stayed close to their parents. None of them noticed me or Lavinia. At first, we stood near the porch of the decoy house out of direct sight. Brent was the first to look up and stop in his tracks. What is that?" he said, squinting. Trinity moved beside him and froze. "Where's the house?" Her voice was flat, but her posture had stiffened. I stepped forward slowly. "Good morning, Brent," I said. "You're right on time. The house is ready for transfer, just like you asked." He looked at the structure in front of him, lopsided porch, crooked roof, one shutter barely hanging. "That's not the house," he snapped. "Where's the real one?" "This is the house," I said calmly. A 2-story wooden structure with a veranda and 4 rooms. Matches the description in the deed exactly. Trinity stepped closer, her heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "Are you playing games?" she asked, pointing at the building. "Where is the cabin?" Brent didn't wait for answers. He marched toward the porch. As he stepped up, the wood groaned beneath him. He opened the front door, looked inside, then spun back around. "This isn't a house," he said. "It's a shell. There's no fireplace, no furnishings." "What have you done?" "I've removed my belongings," I said. "I was told I no longer needed to be there." "You know that's not what I meant," he said, his voice rising. "Where's the original house? The one Dad built with you?" "Where did it go?" I met his eyes. "It's no longer here." "You moved it?" Trinity asked, her voice tightening. "You moved the whole house?" "Yes," I said. "It's my property. I had it relocated." "You can't do that," Brent snapped. "That's illegal. There's no way you're allowed to just—" "It's completely legal," I replied. "And what stands in its place meets the legal description you cited." Audrey tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Can we go inside?" "No," Trinity said sharply, turning the child away. "It's not safe." Brent stepped down from the porch and turned toward me again. "You did this just to spite us?" "No," I said. "I did what you asked. You insisted the cabin now belonged to you. I gave you what the paperwork says. Nothing more, nothing less." Trinity looked around the yard, her expression unreadable. "We're going to sue," she said. "You're playing games with real estate. You're welcome to try," I said. "But I consulted a lawyer before doing anything. The house was mine. I moved it. The structure here fits the deed. I haven't broken any laws." She turned to Brent. "Let's go." "This is ridiculous." He didn't move. "I want to know where it is." "That's not your concern," I said. "You made it clear I wasn't to be there anymore. So I took what was mine and gave you what you claimed." Brent ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Lavinia stepped beside me, her arms crossed. "This conversation is over," she said. "Let's go." But Brent kept pacing, then pulled out his phone. He stepped away to make a call, his voice rising and falling in the distance. We stood quietly while he talked. Trinity stayed by the car, with the children adjusting her sunglasses. Audrey leaned into her mother, confused. Hudson picked up a small rock and turned it in his hand. Eventually, Brent returned phone still in his hand. His expression had changed. "Patrick says it's valid. Technically, he says we don't have a case." He didn't look at me when he said it. "So you're just going to walk away from this?" Trinity asked him. "After everything, I don't know," he muttered. "I don't know what to do." He looked at me again. "We can work something out. If you just tell me where it is. I'll pay for it. Market value." "That's not necessary," I said. "Come on, Mom. Be reasonable. I admitted I was wrong to say what I said. Let's move forward. You said it was yours, I said. So I let it be yours. But I kept my home. This is about pride, he asked. This is about having a place where I belong. The silence settled again. A light wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves. You've never forgiven me for how I've been, have you? He said. It's not about forgiveness, I answered. It's about boundaries. He looked away, jaw tight. Trinity approached him. There's nothing here, she whispered. Let's go. Brent turned back to me one more time. You think this is over? I think it's settled. We'll see, he muttered. He walked back to the car. Trinity gathered the twins. Audrey paused before climbing in and looked back. Hudson came over and reached out his hand. He gave me the rock he'd been holding. For you, he said softly. I took it, curling it gently in my palm. Thank you, sweetheart. Trinity called for him. He turned and ran to the car. Lavinia and I stood and watched as they backed out of the drive and disappeared down the road. She looked at me. You sure you're okay? I'm sure. We turned back to the house, the shell behind us, and the real one waiting down the lake road. When Lavinia and I pulled away from the old lot, I didn't look back. We followed the curve of the road along the lake past the same patches of pine and the familiar break in the trees. The late afternoon sun reflected off the water like copper. It had been a long day, but I wasn't tired. I felt steady. At the new lot, our house stood waiting, settled onto its foundation, as if it had always been there. The front steps creaked a little from the move, and one of the upstairs windows had a fine crack in the corner. But nothing serious. The house had held. Inside, the air smelled like pine and old paper. Everything was still in boxes, but the rooms already felt familiar. Alan's wicker chair leaned in the corner of the living room. The ducks were still wrapped in tissue, waiting to return to the mantel. It didn't feel like a new place. It felt like we'd just come home from a long trip. We started unpacking that night. Not in a rush, just slowly, one room at a time. I found the old patchwork quilt we'd used during colder evenings and spread it across the sofa. Lavinia brought in 2 mugs of tea and set them down on the windowsill. It's strange, she said softly, how quickly it feels like this was always here. I nodded and unfolded a box of framed photographs. My hands moved without thinking, placing them back on the walls where they belonged. Alan by the lake. Me holding Brent as a baby. Pearl and I on her porch one summer, laughing over something we couldn't remember later. The next morning, the sun came in through the east windows and painted the floors in pale gold. We took our tea on the porch and watched the lake, now a new view, but just as wide and calm. By noon, the doorbell rang. It was Ed Pritchard, wiping his hands with a rag. You wouldn't believe what happened after you left, he said, stepping inside with a grin. He told us Brent had called his lawyer from the old lot, some man named Patrick. The lawyer had come in a dark suit, circled the shell of a house with a clipboard, and had what Ed called a real blunt conversation with Brent. Didn't last 10 minutes, Ed said. Lawyer stayed. Brent left. Did he say what was going to happen to the structure, I asked? Ed shrugged. Said it met the technical definition. That's all that mattered. After he left, Lavinia and I went back to unpacking. It took a few days to get everything settled. I ordered new curtains. She reinforced a few beams near the porch and started a small herb garden by the back step. One evening, as we sat beside the fireplace, she looked up from the scarf she was knitting. I think I'm going to stay. I didn't answer right away. She looked over at me. Not just for the next few weeks. I mean, really stay. Full time. What about work? I've already asked, she said. My boss agreed to let me go hybrid 3 days remote, 2 days in town. I'll drive in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I folded my hands in my lap. Are you sure you want to give up your space? There's nothing I'm giving up, she said. I want to be here. I didn't know what to say. I'd grown used to silence, to doing things slowly alone. But the idea of her voice in the hallway, her boots by the back door, her energy moving through the house, it felt right. She smiled. Besides, you need someone to keep you from working too hard. The next week passed in steady rhythm. We had breakfast on the porch when the weather was kind, and when the wind picked up, we sat by the fire. We made plans for the spring garden and walked the edge of the property, marking where we'd plant lilacs and roses. No word came from Brent. The mailbox remained empty, the phone silent. But I did hear from someone else. One morning, while folding laundry in the front room, I heard Lavinia call from the porch. There's a letter. She handed it to me without a word. The return address was California. The handwriting, neat, unfamiliar. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper with raised lettering. Trinity's name was printed at the top. She wrote to say they were done with the old lot, that they had sold it to a developer, and that demolition of the existing structure was scheduled. Brent had accepted a new position at a corporate office out west. They were moving forward. She enclosed 2 drawings from the twins. Hudson's was of a blue house with a dock. Audrey's showed a woman in a dress holding a cookie with the words, "I love Grandma," written in red crayon. I held the papers quietly. I didn't say anything. Lavinia leaned over to look. You okay? I nodded and walked to the kitchen. I took 2 magnets off the fridge and pinned the drawings to the door. They looked small against the white surface, but they filled the room. Later that evening, as we sat with mugs of cocoa, a soft snow began to fall. The lake shimmered under the porch light. Lavinia looked over at me and asked, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe someday, but I'm not waiting." She nodded. We sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled low. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the eaves like a hand. Inside, it was warm. Spring came early that year. The snow pulled back from the edges of the yard before we expected, and within a week, the ice on the lake began to crack and curl away from the shoreline. In the mornings, birds called from the trees louder than before. I found myself leaving the windows open longer, letting the scent of damp earth drift through the house. Lavinia and I had spent most of March working in the garden. We dug up the beds, turning the soil, pulling the rocks and twigs that had collected over the winter. We replanted the irises and hostas we'd salvaged from the old place and added new rows of tulips and columbine. The herb plot near the kitchen was already showing green tips by the second week of April. On a mild Thursday afternoon, a gray sedan pulled up to the edge of the property. The man who stepped out wore a trim dark suit and carried a briefcase. He had the kind of posture that told me before he spoke that he was here on Brent's behalf. He walked up the drive and tipped his head slightly. "Mrs. Howard." "Yes," I said, resting my gloved hand on the handle of the trowel I'd been using. "That's me. My name is Patrick Donovan. I'm your son's attorney." I stood up slowly. "Is there a problem?" "No, ma'am," he said, opening the briefcase. "I've been asked to deliver these documents to you personally." He handed me a thick envelope and a folder. "It concerns your former property. Mr. Howard has transferred all remaining interest in the land to you. The deed is enclosed." I took the folder and turned it over in my hands. "There's also a letter," he added, pulling a second envelope from the case. "Mr. Howard asked that you read it yourself." I nodded. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" "No, thank you," he said politely. "I've got to return to Milwaukee before dark. I just need your signature here and here." He held out a pen and pointed to the marked lines. I signed both my handwriting, a little uneven on the second one. He slipped the pages back into his briefcase. Everything's been filed with the county clerk. The property is now solely yours again. No liens, no conditions. He extended his hand, and I shook it. Thank you for bringing it. He gave a small smile. Take care, Mrs. Howard. When I turned back toward the house, Lavinia was standing at the porch, drying her hands on a dish towel. What was that about? He gave the land back, I said, climbing the steps. Brent signed over everything. She blinked, then followed me inside. We sat at the kitchen table while I opened the envelope. The letter was written in Brent's handwriting. I recognized it instantly, small, neat, careful lettering with a slight rightward tilt. Mom, I thought about calling. I even picked up the phone a few times, but I wasn't sure what to say. Maybe I'm still not. I was wrong. About all of it. About the house, about how I spoke to you. About thinking I had the right to make decisions that weren't mine. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not writing to ask for anything. But I want you to know I've thought about what I did. I see it now. I'm returning the property in full, no strings, no expectations. Consider it a small part of what I owe you. For the things I didn't understand, for the time I didn't give. We've moved to California. Trinity and the kids are settling in. Maybe someday I'll be able to say this out loud. Until then, I hope the house is everything you need. Brent. I read it twice before folding it carefully and sliding it back into the envelope. Lavinia watched me for a moment, then asked, How do you feel? I don't know yet, I said. It's not anger, not joy either. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever it is, you earned it. I nodded. Later that afternoon, I walked the path down to the lake. The dock Lavinia had built stood firm, still missing its last 2 planks. I sat at the edge, letting my feet dangle just above the cold water. I thought about the little boy Brent had been, about the years I'd spent trying to reach him, understand him, make room for him. And I thought about the man he'd become, distant, determined, but still capable of learning something even late. I stayed there until the shadows began to stretch across the yard. Then I stood and walked back to the house. That evening, we lit a fire in the living room. The house was quiet. The letter sat folded on the side table. The drawings from Hudson and Audrey were still on the fridge. Do you think he'll ever come back? Lavinia asked softly, curled on the end of the couch. I'm not waiting, I said. But I'll leave the door unlocked. She smiled and passed me a mug of tea. Outside, the wind stirred the pines. Inside, the house held steady. The rest of spring passed quietly. The garden filled in just like we'd hoped. The tulips opened in gentle reds and yellows. The dock was finished by mid-May, and on warm afternoons, I liked to sit at the end of it with my feet in the water. Lavinia brought her laptop down sometimes and worked from the picnic bench under the birch tree. Her calls were quiet, her voice steady. Inside the house, everything had settled. The walls no longer echoed the floors, no longer creaked when the wind picked up. Alan's chair sat exactly where it used to this time, beside a new window with a slightly better view of the lake. By the time June arrived, the rhythm of our days had become something I looked forward to. Morning coffee, then garden work, or writing letters. Sometimes I'd read. Sometimes I'd just sit. One morning, I was folding towels in the bedroom when I heard the mailbox clatter shut. I walked out to the end of the drive, expecting the usual circulars and utility bills. There was one cream envelope. The return address was unfamiliar. Postmarked San Francisco. I brought it inside, set it on the table, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy stationery. At the top in crayon was written to Grandma by the lake. Below it, 2 drawings. Audrey's showed a woman with white hair and a pie in her hands. Hudson's was a picture of a blue house with stars above it. In the corner, he'd drawn a stick figure fishing off a dock. Tucked behind them was a short note from Trinity. Judith. The kids still talk about you. Hudson asks if your house floats. Audrey wanted to draw your cookies. We're adjusting to life here. Brent works a lot. Just thought you might want to know they remember. Trinity. I turned the paper over. Nothing on the back. I didn't say anything to Lavinia right away. I placed the drawings on the fridge beside the old ones and went back to folding towels. That evening, while we were finishing dinner, she finally asked, "Did something come in the mail?" I nodded. From Trinity. The kids drew more pictures. Did Brent write anything? No. She looked at me for a moment, then stood and took the plates to the sink. Later, as we sat by the fireplace, I told her I was thinking of keeping the second plot. You mean the old lot? Yes, I said. It's mine again. I'm not in a rush to do anything with it. You think they'll come back? She asked. I don't know, I said. But if they ever do, I'd rather be the one deciding who uses it. She nodded, folding her legs beneath her. That's fair. The next day we walked the path to the water. The lake was high that morning, and the breeze was cool enough that I brought a shawl. We talked about maybe putting in a small fire pit near the dock, somewhere to roast marshmallows or sit in the evenings. Then, near the edge of the garden, we saw it, a car parked halfway across the gravel engine still idling. The man who stepped out was younger than Brent, taller. He wore a navy jacket and had something wrapped in brown paper under one arm. He paused at the edge of the yard and gave a little wave. Mrs. Howard? I stepped forward. Yes, he smiled gently. Name's Raymond. I'm with the developer who bought the lot over in Kinburn. I was sent to return this. He handed me the package. It was heavier than I expected. When I unwrapped the paper, I saw what it was. Alan's duck. The one that used to sit on the mantel? I don't understand, I said quietly. Raymond cleared his throat. When our team went in to clear the lot, there wasn't much left, but one of the workers found this tucked under the floorboards. Looked like someone had hidden it there. I nodded slowly. He continued. We figured it might mean something. I checked the deed and saw your name listed before. Took a chance and tracked you down. Thank you, I said, barely louder than a whisper. He tipped his cap. Hope I didn't interrupt anything. Not at all. After he left, I carried the duck inside. The paint was a little scratched, but it was still whole. I set it back on the mantel right where it used to be. Lavinia stood beside me for a moment, then rested her hand on my shoulder. You think Brent left it there? I looked at the worn carving, the way Alan had painted the tail feathers just a bit too bright. Maybe, I said, or maybe he just knew it shouldn't be lost. We didn't talk about it much after that, but in the evenings when the sun fell low and the house felt full, I often found my eyes drifting back to that little wooden figure. Some things, it seemed, found their way home again, even when we didn't expect them to. Summer arrived at the lake, gentle and bright. Days stretched long, the air sweet with the scent of cut grass and blooming flowers. Most evenings I found myself sitting on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, watching the sky fade from gold to deep blue. Sometimes Lavinia joined me, her laughter drifting through the open windows as she recounted small victories from her workday or plans for the garden. Inside, the house was truly ours now. Alan's duck sat quietly on the mantel right where it belonged. Photos of my family, those here and those far away, lined the shelves, reminding me that love, even when it goes quiet, leaves its mark. The dock was sturdy, the garden thick with color, and the walls no longer echoed with old doubts or worry. Instead, there was peace, an ordinary, everyday kind that I'd learned not to take for granted. Every now and then, a letter would arrive. Sometimes a drawing from Hudson or Audrey full of bright colors and curious shapes. Occasionally a brief note from Trinity, never asking for anything, just letting me know that they remembered. Brent's handwriting didn't appear again, but I didn't wait by the window or keep a tally of the silence. I learned to cherish what was present, Lavinia's company, the laughter in the kitchen, the steady rhythm of new days. In quiet moments, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The fight for this house wasn't about walls or wood or land. It was about dignity, about honoring a lifetime of memories and standing up for my own worth. I didn't do it with anger or spite. I did it because I needed to hold on to something true. That decision brought me a kind of freedom I never expected. Now, with each season that passes, I find comfort in the simple joys. The smell of earth after rain, the way sunlight catches the edge of a photo frame, the soft sound of Lavinia humming as she works in the yard. I realize now that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the courage to say, no more, and then make a life out of what remains. If you've ever stood your ground for something that mattered, no matter how small, then you know how it feels to build a home, not just a house. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, I hope you'll share your own memories or pass along a bit of kindness to someone who needs it. We're all finding our way one day at a time.